The rain hadn't let up for hours, pounding ceaselessly on the dented metal roof of West Creek Animal Shelter, its drumming like a steady heartbeat in a place where hope flickered more faintly by the day. Outside, water snaked in thin streams along the cracked sidewalk, pooling into muddy puddles beneath flickering streetlights. The back kennels, always the coldest and dampest part of the building, were quiet save for the occasional bark or the whine of a restless pup. Inside, the air was thick with the heavy scent of wet fur, bleach, and something else harder to name, desperation. The shelter was stretched beyond its limits, bursting at the seams, underfunded, and buried in an endless stream of animals no one wanted to claim. And for dogs like Rex, that meant time was running out. Tucked away in the farthest corner of the last row, Rex barely resembled the noble German shepherd he once was. His body, once strong and built for purpose, had wasted away, bones pressing softly beneath his thin, mottled coat. Scars crisscrossed his muzzle, a harsh and unspoken testimony of a past soaked in pain. His ears drooped, unmoving. His tail, once proud and wagging, now lay curled so tightly beneath him it nearly disappeared against his side. While the other dogs scrambled to the fronts of their cages at the sound of approaching footsteps, yipping, barking, their tails thumping with anticipation, Rex did not stir. He had long since abandoned that ritual. Somewhere between the sting of chains and the blows of a cruel hand, hope had drained from him. He didn't believe anymore. Not in people, not in kindness, and certainly not in second chances. Karen Hall, the shelter manager, stood at the end of the kennel row, a clipboard clenched tightly to her chest, as she stared down the list she dreaded seeing. Only 3 names today. Only 3 on the list, but those 3 felt like 300. At the bottom of the page, just barely legible through smudged ink and damp paper, was Rex's name. Karen let out a breath, one that mingled with the distant rumble of thunder outside, and closed her eyes for a moment. No matter how long she'd worked in rescue, no matter how many lives she'd helped save or how many tough calls she'd made, dogs like Rex always cut the deepest. The ones who weren't dangerous or mean, just broken, shattered in ways that no ordinary adopter wanted to take on. These dogs didn't need food or walks, they needed healing. They needed someone patient, someone willing to wait. And the sad truth was that this shelter didn't have the resources for miracles. "Sorry, buddy," she whispered, glancing at the motionless shape in the back of the cage. "I wish it didn't have to end like this." But Rex didn't lift his head, didn't move. His world was already too quiet. Across town, the storm battered an old apartment window where Emily Carter sat cross-legged on a threadbare couch, scrolling mindlessly through her phone. The rain's rhythm was soft, lulling, but her mind was restless. She'd been feeling off all day, haunted by a strange weight she couldn't name. Her thumb paused mid-scroll as a photo filled the screen. A dog, German shepherd. His fur patchy, his eyes dark and far too human. He wasn't looking at the camera, he was looking past it like he'd already said goodbye. The caption below the image was painfully direct. Rex, 5 years old. Needs a home by tomorrow. Time's up. Emily felt something twist inside her chest. She had seen posts like this before. Dozens, maybe more. Dogs on the edge of the end. Stories wrapped in a single sentence. They always got to her, but this one hit differently. Something in his face, something in the quiet plea behind those eyes, refused to let her scroll on. She stared at the image for a long time, her heart beginning to race. "Don't do this to yourself," she told herself. Not again. 3 years ago, she'd tried to adopt a pit mix. A beautiful boy with a rough history. She had meant well, had wanted to help, to be the soft landing he needed. But when he lashed out in fear, she froze. Panic overtook her, and a professional had to step in. Eventually, she made the hardest call of her life and returned him to the rescue. She'd cried for weeks. The guilt had never really left. "You can't save them all." Jessie's voice echoed in her mind. Her best friend's warning turned mantra. But Rex's eyes wouldn't let her move on. They begged not for rescue, not even for love, but simply not to be forgotten. Without realizing it, her fingers tapped the shelter's number. It rang. Once, twice, 4 times. Then voicemail. "Hi, my name's Emily Carter," she said, her voice quivering. "I just saw your post about Rex. Please don't do anything until I get there. I'll be there tomorrow. First thing, I want to help." She ended the call and let the phone fall to the couch. Her hands trembled, her breath shallow. She had no plan. Just instinct. Just hope. Hope that this time she could be enough. That maybe after everything, she was finally strong enough to be someone's second chance. Back at the shelter, Rex remained curled in his dark kennel, the steady tap of rain against the window above his cage barely registering. His body didn't move. But somewhere in the world beyond those rusted bars, something had shifted. A voice had spoken for him. A stranger had made a promise, and though he couldn't know it yet, his life was about to change. For the first time in a very long time, someone was coming. Someone wasn't turning away. Someone had seen him, and chosen him. Walking into any animal shelter was never easy. There was always a familiar heaviness that clung to Emily's chest, a quiet grief born from knowing she couldn't possibly save them all. But today felt different. Today, maybe, she could save just one. As she pushed the door open, it creaked loudly on its hinges, and the scent of bleach, damp fur, and something heavier, resignation, wrapped around her like a fog. A chorus of barks echoed from the back of the building, a mix of panic, excitement, and desperation. Some dogs barked in hopeful rhythm, others cried out in fear, all vying for the attention of anyone who stepped inside. Behind the front desk stood Karen Hall, the shelter's manager. Her expression was impassive at first, exhausted, distant, until her eyes sharpened with recognition. "You're the one who left the message," she said, surprise tinged with fatigue. For Rex, Emily nodded and stepped forward, nerves bubbling under her skin. "Yes, please," she said, voice barely steady. "Tell me I'm not too late." Karen let out a breath and set her clipboard down with a sigh, her fingers resting on it for a moment as if the weight of her answer might fall with it. "You're cutting it close," she admitted, her voice low. "We were going to." She trailed off, unable to finish. "He's still here." Relief surged through Emily, but it was quickly replaced by a new anxiety. Walking through the door, saying the right words, those were the easy parts. The real challenge lay ahead, reaching a broken dog and convincing him that she wouldn't be another name on his list of disappointments. "Come on," Karen said, motioning for her to follow. "I'll take you to him." They walked together down a narrow, dim corridor that reeked of old kibble, cleaning fluid, and weariness. The concrete floor was cold beneath Emily's boots, the lights above flickering faintly. Metal doors lined each side of the hallway. Behind some were eager faces, tails wagging at the sound of footsteps. Others housed shadows, dogs curled into corners, silent, afraid, waiting for something or someone who might never come. Karen led her to the very last kennel, on the far left. There, curled so tightly in the back corner it was hard to tell where his body ended and the shadows began, was Rex. He didn't lift his head. His ears were pressed flat against his skull, his eyes only half open, distant. There was no movement of his tail, no curiosity or acknowledgement, just a hollow stillness. "He's completely shut down," Karen said quietly, crouching beside Emily. "Hasn't made a sound in days." Emily dropped to a crouch herself, lowering her body slowly, so she wouldn't pose a threat. Her hands rested on her knees, palms up, open, gentle, offering nothing but time. "Hey there, buddy," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "I'm Emily." Rex didn't move. But then after a few still moments, one of his ears twitched. Karen folded her arms and shook her head. "He's not going to come to you. He doesn't trust anyone." Emily didn't argue. She didn't move closer. She simply stayed there, legs folded beneath her, still and quiet. "I know you're scared," she said gently. "I've been scared too." For a moment Rex's eyes flicked toward her. It was quick, so fast she wondered if she'd imagined it. But her heart skipped just the same. The air in the hallway seemed to hold its breath. Minutes passed. The distant hum of overhead lights buzzed faintly, occasionally drowned out by a faraway bark. Emily stayed grounded in the silence, syncing her breathing with his, making herself small, unthreatening, present. Eventually Rex's nose began to twitch. He lifted his head just an inch, nostrils flaring as he tried to catch her scent. "That's it," she whispered, a hopeful smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She slowly extended her hand, palm still up, stopping a few inches from the cage bars. She didn't press, she didn't beg, she let him decide. After what felt like an eternity, Rex leaned forward, cautiously, and touched his scarred nose to her fingertips. The contact was brief, just a moment, but it broke something open in both of them. Karen let out a breath, quiet but audible. "Well, I'll be damned." Emily looked up, her eyes glassy. "Let me take him," she said, voice trembling. "Please." Karen hesitated. She had seen this story play out too many times to be easily swayed. Dogs like Rex had a way of breaking hearts a second time. But she saw something rare in the woman crouched before this trembling dog, something fierce, something steady, a quiet kind of courage. "All right," she said softly. "But if this doesn't work." "It will," Emily said, firmly but gently. Karen unlocked the kennel. The latch groaned, and Rex flinched hard, every muscle in his body suddenly taut with fear. Emily stood slowly, holding a leash, but she didn't use it. "Let's get you out of here, big guy," she whispered. Rex hovered at the edge of the kennel. The hallway stretched out before him, wide, cold, filled with unfamiliar sound. Emily didn't tug. She didn't coax. She waited. Finally, after a long, breathless pause, Rex stepped forward, one paw, then the next. Cautious, wary, but moving. A first step, a beginning. Emily's apartment was quiet when they arrived. She pushed the front door open slowly, revealing a modest living space filled with mismatched furniture, warm lighting, and the faint scent of lavender-scented cleaner. Rex stood frozen in the doorway, tail tucked, legs stiff. He lowered his head and braced himself as though expecting pain. "It's okay," Emily whispered, kneeling beside him again. "This is home now." Rex didn't move. His eyes flicked to the corners of the room, to the ceiling fan overhead, then back to her. She stepped aside, letting him decide. After a long moment, he took a step inside, then another. His nails clicked against the hardwood, tentative and slow. He clung to the wall, keeping his back to it, always watching the shadows, always preparing for what might come. He was alert, not with curiosity, but with survival. His entire body radiated tension. The corner near the door became his retreat. He curled into a ball, pressed tight to the floor, his gaze fixed on Emily. He didn't bark, didn't whine. The silence he carried was the kind that spoke volumes. It wasn't peaceful. It was helplessness. Emily gently placed a water bowl nearby, and a blanket not far from it. She didn't try to reach for him. She simply sat a few feet away, letting him see she wasn't going anywhere. Not now, not ever. The simple comforts of Emily's apartment should have been enough to ease Rex's fear. The warmth of the room, the quiet hum of the rain, the soft lighting, but he remained frozen. His body curled tight in the corner like he was trying to disappear into the walls. His fear hung thick in the air, as real and heavy as fog. That first night, Emily didn't sleep in her bed. She unrolled an old sleeping bag on the living room floor, not too close to Rex, but close enough that he would know she was there if he needed her. She didn't speak directly to him, didn't make eye contact or sudden moves. Instead, she opened an old paperback and read aloud, her voice low and calm, letting the soft rhythm fill the silence. It wasn't for him exactly, but she hoped, if he listened, it might help him feel less alone. Her voice drifted through the apartment like a quiet current in a still lake, something steady, something he could reach for if he wanted. When morning came, he hadn't moved from his spot, still curled up, still tense. But his eyes weren't quite as dull. It was the smallest change, barely noticeable, but Emily clung to it, and so a rhythm began to form. Mornings filled with whispered reassurances and small peaceful silences. Afternoons passed with Emily working from her little table while Rex stayed against the wall, his eyes always tracking her. In the evenings she sat on the floor, back against the couch, simply existing in the same space with him. She never reached for him, never pressured him. She let him choose when or if he would come closer. She gave him time. One evening Jessie called. Her voice was laced with concern masked by humor. "So, how's the new project?" she asked, lightly teasing. Emily looked toward Rex, still curled in his corner like a shadow. "He's not a project," she said gently. "He's just someone who needs space." Jessie's sigh crackled over the speaker. "You know what I mean? I'm just worried. The last time you tried this—" "I know," Emily cut in, her voice quiet, her heart twisting at the memory. That last rescue, the one she couldn't save, had left a scar she hadn't dared touch in years. She had failed him. But this felt different. Jessie didn't argue, but her silence said enough. "Just be careful, Em." "I will," Emily said, though she knew her heart was already too far in. 2 nights later, it happened. The shift, the first real crack in the armor Rex had built around himself. Emily was sitting cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through emails, when she felt something brush her arm, so light she almost thought she imagined it. She turned slowly, careful not to startle him. There he was, Rex standing just inches away, his nose barely touching her sleeve. His eyes were wide, searching, but not afraid. He looked unsure, like even he didn't know why he'd come. "Hey there," she whispered, barely daring to breathe. "That's a brave boy." He stayed for a second longer, before slipping back to his corner, but something had changed. The space between them didn't feel so wide anymore. Something invisible had been bridged. That night, when she unrolled her sleeping bag, Rex didn't lie by the door. He lay just a few feet away, close enough to hear her breathing. It wasn't full trust, not yet, but it was the beginning of something real. Rain fell for hours. The following night, a steady tapping against the windows, turning the world outside into a mirror of silver and gray. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Emily sat curled on the couch, with a cup of chamomile tea, and a book open in her lap, though she wasn't really reading. Her eyes kept drifting to Rex, stretched near the front door, his ears twitching at every passing car or creak of the floorboards. He never fully relaxed. Even in sleep, his body seemed ready to run. She had begun to notice a pattern, how the more comfortable Rex grew inside, the more aware he became of what might lurk outside. At first, she chalked it up to trauma, his way of staying alert, a habit born from fear. But then, it happened. A deep, guttural growl rolled from Rex's chest, rumbling low and warning. It vibrated through the quiet apartment, like distant thunder. Emily sat up, her heart racing. "Rex?" she whispered. He didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the front door, his ears pinned forward, his muscles taut. Slowly, Emily set down her mug and crossed to the window. She pulled back the curtain just enough to see the street, and froze. A dark, unmarked car sat parked across from her building. No headlights, no movement, just a presence, still and deliberate. It had been there for a while, and now every part of her screamed that something wasn't right. She murmured to Rex, trying to soothe him, though her own voice wavered. "It's probably nothing," but her gut said otherwise. The next morning, she couldn't shake the feeling. She called the shelter, hoping it was just her imagination. Karen answered, her voice tired. "Actually, yeah," she said, hesitation thick. "Someone did call yesterday. Didn't give a name, just asked if Rex was still here." Emily's stomach twisted. "Did he say why?" "No, and when I told him Rex had been adopted, he hung up, didn't ask who, didn't ask anything." Emily's breath caught. "Did you recognize the voice?" "No," Karen said. "But I've been doing this long enough to know when someone's asking for the wrong reasons." Emily hung up and went to the window. The car was gone, but the unease remained. That night, Jessie came by after her hospital shift, her arms full of takeout and cheap beer. "Figured you could use backup," she said, kicking off her shoes. Emily tried to smile. "You have no idea." They sat on the floor, eating straight from the cartons, while Rex lay nearby, eyes fixed on the door. Emily told Jessie everything. The car, the call, the feeling that someone was watching. Jessie's face hardened. "You think it's from his past?" Emily nodded slowly. "I don't know, but something's not right." Jessie reached across and gripped her hand. "Whatever happens," she said firmly, "you've already saved him once, and if someone comes looking for him, they're gonna have to go through you." Emily looked over at Rex, her brave boy, her silent survivor, and for the first time, she let the thought settle. If someone from his past was out there, they'd have to face a woman who had already chosen him. This time, he wouldn't be alone. Not ever again. Emily's smile barely reached her lips, but the fire in her eyes was undeniable. "Yeah," she whispered, "and you're damn right." That night, the rain returned with a vengeance, drumming like a war drum against the rooftop, echoing through the tense stillness of the apartment. The walls felt thinner, the darkness outside felt thicker. As she brushed her teeth in the small bathroom, a low, ominous growl rumbled from the hallway. It was Rex again. Emily's heart clenched. She spat out the toothpaste and rushed to the living room, her bare feet cold against the wood. Rex was rigid at the door, his eyes locked on something outside, his entire body coiled with tension. She crept to the window and peered through the fogged glass. There it was, the same black sedan, parked in the same spot across the street, unmoving, cloaked in shadow. This time, she didn't wait. Her fingers were shaking as she unlocked her phone and dialed Deputy Mark Reynolds. He was the local officer who had dealt with more than a few cruelty cases and illegal dogfighting rings. If anyone would understand, it was him. The phone rang only once before his voice answered, groggy but alert. "Emily, there's someone outside," she said in a hushed voice, eyes never leaving the street. "They were here last night too. Karen told me someone called about Rex. I think it's connected." Mark didn't hesitate. "Lock your doors. I'm on my way." She ended the call and immediately checked every lock on every window and door. Her breath came in shallow puffs. Rex remained stationed by the entrance, his growl now a constant hum in the background. Emily knelt beside him and rested her hand gently along his spine. "I won't let anyone take you," she whispered, even though part of her wasn't sure she could keep that promise. 10 minutes later, Mark's patrol car rolled into the driveway with the headlights off. He knocked softly. By the time Emily opened the door, the dark sedan had vanished. She told him everything. The car, the call, the way Rex reacted. Mark listened carefully, his face darkening with every word. "If this has anything to do with the old dog-fighting busts we handled," he said grimly, "then you could be in serious danger. These men, they don't forget, and they don't give up." Emily's hands clenched into fists. "What do I do?" "You keep alert," Mark said firmly. "You don't go anywhere alone. If anything feels off, you call me. I'll run some names through the system. Maybe someone got out early, or is trying to reconnect with that old life." Rex hadn't moved. He remained by the door, vigilant and vibrating, with the kind of tension that came from years of surviving brutality. Emily looked at him and said quietly, "I won't let anyone hurt him." Mark nodded. "I know you won't." That night, after Mark left, Emily curled on the couch, with Rex beside her. His head rested on her lap, and though his breathing was heavy with stress, he allowed her to stroke his fur. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, they found a fragile peace. Her hand traced the scars on his back, each one a story she didn't yet know, but promised to protect. "Whatever's coming," she whispered, "we'll face it together." Rex didn't wag his tail, not exactly, but his body relaxed, and that was enough. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, neither of them would be facing it alone. Then, just after midnight, the knock came. It wasn't a timid tap, or a neighbor's accidental bump. It was sharp, deliberate. 3 quick raps against the front door that sliced through the night like a blade. Rex was up instantly. A guttural snarl tore from his throat as he planted himself between Emily and the door. His hackles bristled, his body low, defensive ready. Emily's pulse surged in her throat. She gripped her phone tightly and tiptoed toward the peephole, careful not to make a sound. Under the flickering streetlight stood a man, jeans soaked from the rain, jacket too thin for the cold, a cigarette burning between his fingers. His face was partially shadowed, but she knew. She knew without needing confirmation. Troy Beckett. She didn't need Mark's intel. She saw it in the way Rex trembled with a cocktail of rage and terror. This was the man who had turned her dog into a ghost, the one who carved trauma into his bones. "I know you're in there," Troy called out. His voice was hoarse, like gravel under tires. "You've got something that belongs to me." Emily didn't flinch. She didn't open the door. "You need to leave," she said, her voice sharp and clear. "He's not yours anymore." Troy took a slow step forward. "That dog cost me a lot of money," he said with venom. "A fighter like him, he's worth more than you can imagine." Emily's stomach turned. "He's not a fighter. He's not your property. If you come near this house again, I'll call the police." Troy laughed, a low, mocking sound that sent chills down her spine. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, smirking. "I'm not scared of your local deputy. That dog's mine. I always get what's mine." At that, Rex lunged at the door, barking with a ferocity Emily had never seen before. His snarl was raw, unfiltered fury. His paw struck the door, as if trying to claw through it. His eyes burned with the pain of memories that hadn't healed. Troy sneered. "See that? That's the champion I raised. You think you can turn him into some soft house pet? You don't know him like I do." "I know him better than you ever did." Emily shot back, stepping forward, placing herself protectively in front of Rex. "And I know he's not afraid of you anymore." Troy's smirk faded, just slightly. He flicked his cigarette into the wet grass and gave the door one last, lingering look. "This ain't over," he muttered. And then, just like that, he was gone. Emily sank to her knees as his footsteps faded into the night. Her body trembled from adrenaline, her breath coming fast. Rex whimpered beside her, still shaking. She reached out with trembling fingers and rested them gently on his fur. "Easy," she whispered. "He's gone." Rex didn't pull away. He pressed his head against her leg and let out a low, exhausted sigh. She wrapped her arms around him, holding tight. The storm outside hadn't passed, but inside, they had weathered something far more dangerous, and they had done it together. Troy Beckett could lurk in the shadows and throw threats all he wanted, but Emily Carter wasn't backing down, not now, not ever. She had fought too hard for Rex, had earned his fragile trust through quiet moments, gentle words, and unwavering patience. If Troy believed he could return and lay claim to a life he had broken, he was in for a harsh reckoning. Emily had made a promise not just to Rex but to herself that no one would take him away. Her hand curled gently around the thick fur at Rex's neck as he lay beside her, his breathing slow and even. "We're in this together," she whispered into his coat, her voice steady despite the storm pounding outside. The rain washed away Troy's footprints from the earth, but inside that small apartment, something stronger was being built, a bond between a scarred dog and a woman who refused to give up. Tomorrow they would face whatever came together. The next day, the hum of fluorescent lights filled the small courtroom, their sterile glow casting a pale hue over every surface. Emily sat at the petitioner's table, her hands clutched tightly in her lap, her knuckles white from tension. Across from her, Troy Beckett leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed, a smug grin tugging at the edges of his mouth. At Emily's feet, Rex rested with his head gently laid across her boot, his ears flicked at every sound, papers rustling, chairs scraping, but he stayed grounded by the slow, steady rhythm of Emily's hand brushing along his back. For once he wasn't trembling, maybe because he knew she wouldn't let anything happen to him now. The judge entered, a gray-haired man with tired eyes and a face lined with years of hard decisions. Clearing his throat, he began, "We are here to determine the legal ownership of the German Shepherd known as Rex." Troy's lawyer stood first, polished and smug, like he'd walked out of a commercial. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Beckett, raised Rex from a puppy. He trained him, fed him, and invested considerable time and money into the dog. As such, he is his rightful property." That word, property, burned through Emily like acid. She glanced down at Rex. No, he wasn't property, not anymore. When her turn came, she stood, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Your Honor, Rex was abandoned and rescued by West Creek Shelter. I legally adopted him. I have all the necessary paperwork." She handed over the signed documents, the pages trembling slightly in her hands. They were her armor now, the proof that she wasn't just another person who let Rex down. The judge skimmed the paperwork with a nod. "Mr. Beckett claims he was unaware the dog ended up at a shelter. Is that true?" Troy stood, voice oozing fake innocence. "Yes, sir. He ran off. I didn't know where he was until I saw a post online. I never gave him up." Emily clenched her jaw, holding in her disgust. "With all due respect, Your Honor, Rex didn't run away. He was dumped, and I have evidence to prove it." She gestured toward Deputy Mark Reynolds, who stepped forward and handed a thick file to the bailiff. Inside were medical records, evidence of the injuries, malnutrition, and deep scars Rex had endured before he was rescued. "These aren't just signs of neglect," Emily said quietly. "They're proof of abuse. Rex didn't escape a loving home. He escaped hell." The judge's brow furrowed deeper as he flipped through the evidence. A grainy photo showed Rex in the shelter, curled tightly in a corner, every rib visible under his patchy fur. His eyes were empty. "Mr. Beckett," the judge said sharply, "can you explain these injuries?" Troy's lawyer tried to interject, but the judge cut him off. "I asked your client." Troy hesitated, then shrugged. "Dogs get into fights sometimes. It happens." Emily's hand trembled beneath the table. "Not like this," she said firmly. "Rex didn't get those scars playing fetch." The judge then asked if Emily had any character witnesses. She nodded toward Jesse, who stepped forward without hesitation. "I'm Jesse Green. I've known Emily for years. I watched her bring Rex home. He was terrified, broken. I saw her sit beside him every night. She never gave up on him. And now, when she calls his name, he wags his tail. That's not just ownership, Your Honor. That's love." Silence hung heavy in the courtroom, and then, as if on cue, Rex stood, his tail wagged low but steady, and he walked over to Emily. He rested his head on her knee, looking up at her with eyes no longer haunted, but full of trust. The judge set down his pen. "I've reviewed the evidence and the testimony. Rex will remain in the care of Miss Emily Carter. Furthermore, Mr. Beckett is prohibited from making any future contact with either Miss Carter or the dog. This court is adjourned." Troy stood abruptly, muttering something bitter under his breath as he stormed out. Emily barely noticed. She was already on her knees, arms wrapped around Rex's neck, tears spilling into his fur. "We did it, buddy," she whispered. "We're free." Weeks later, the crisp autumn breeze danced across a golden field as the sun dipped low on the horizon. Rex ran ahead, his powerful legs moving with a freedom that only came from true healing. His ears perked forward, tail held high. He barked joyfully into the open sky. Emily stood at the top of a gentle hill, her hands tucked in her pockets, her eyes never leaving him. He had come so far from trembling in a shelter cage to this running, playing living. Jessie stood beside her, smiling. You saved him, Em. Emily shook her head gently. We saved each other. Jessie gave her a nudge. I still say you should have named him Miracle. Emily laughed. He is, but he's also a fighter. That's why he's Rex. As they watched him play, Rex trotted back toward them, a stick in his mouth, tail wagging wildly. He dropped it at Emily's feet, his eyes shining with mischief and joy. She knelt and scratched behind his ears, her fingers brushing the faint scars hidden beneath his thick fur. They were still there, but they didn't define him anymore. They told his story, a story of survival, of trust, of starting again. You know, Jessie said softly, I used to think you were rescuing him, but I think maybe he rescued you. Emily's throat tightened. She didn't deny it, because Jessie was right. The sun dipped lower, casting the sky in gold and crimson. Emily stood, brushing her hand along Rex's back. Come on, big guy, she said. Let's go home. And that word home meant something new now. It wasn't just a place. It was a feeling. It was trust. It was second chances. It was Rex. Together they walked toward the old pickup parked beneath the trees, Rex sticking close to her side, glancing up every few steps with a look of pure devotion. As they reached the truck, Jessie gave Rex one last pat. Take care of her, okay? Rex gave a soft bark, like a promise. The drive back was quiet, peaceful. Rex's head rested in Emily's lap, his breath slow, steady, safe. When they reached the little apartment, their sanctuary, he bounded in first, like always, checking everything before she entered. It was still small, still simple, but it was perfect. It was theirs. Emily curled up on the couch, and Rex jumped beside her, resting his head on her lap. Her hand stroked his fur gently. For the first time in longer than she could remember, her heart was full. We're family now, she whispered, and Rex's tail thumped softly in response. No fear, no doubt, only trust. Outside the wind howled, but inside a once broken girl and a scarred dog had found what they'd both been searching for. A home.